to order, please, and start with public comments for any member of the public to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any subject which is within the jurisdiction of the Measure P&S Oversight Committee, but which is not on the agenda.
Okay, I just have a small or a long announcement, actually. We have a new process in place for public participation. We encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom Gov, which is a secure service for use by government agencies. Joining on Zoom is preferred because there is no lag time. You are connected live meeting in real time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, join the meeting using Zoom on the app or by telephone, making sure you join in time to accommodate this delay. To join the meeting on Zoom on your computer or phone, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearch.org. Since the meeting has started, you'll find the agenda under the recent tab. To join by phone, dial 833-566-8864, then enter meeting ID 160-515-5480. And if prompted to enter participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment, raise your hand using Zoom, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute yourself. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. We ask that public commenters turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected by phone, as any background noise will interfere with the broadcast. I will call on each public speaker in order of their hands raised. The chair has designated a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting. If you're connected live on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. Please stay within your time limit so that I don't have to cut you off. We look forward to receiving your public comments.
Wonderful. So shall we then proceed? Board member, do we have any board member comments or any questions for clarification before we start? Seeing none, let's start with number 1, approval of the minutes from October 12th meeting.
I'll move for approval. It's Rick Heuer.
Second, Cina.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, could we call for the vote, please?
Do we need to open it to the public for comments real quick?
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's
yes.
okay.
God, I might get the Brown Act right someday too. Do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, perfect. Then shall we have a roll call vote then? Please?
Yes. Chorbajian.
Aye.
Cina.
Aye.
Rick Heuer.
Aye.
And I have Rick Aldinger and Judy Sanderlin absent.
So shall we then move on to number 2, review unaudited expenditures from July 1, 2020 through November 30, 2020 for conformance to Measure P&S language. Rick Heuer.
I've got a question. It's not so much a question. It's I guess it is a question. When we get over to storm drains, I'm assuming the language in Measure P&S for storm drains said the entire storm drain system, because I see you're doing work on the retention ponds and things which are part of that system. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically what the Measure P&S did, it actually identified specific storm drainage areas, both of the areas around Lake Elistero, the 2 feeder areas, Washerwoman's Pond and Laguna Morada, as well as some of the areas in the Ryan Ranch area were identified specifically. Way back when we first started, That was one of the first topics we did begin our work on with P, because we knew the environmental process would take a long time, which, as a matter of fact, it did. It's just seeing the fruit of those labors from way back in. But the entire storm drain system was essentially identified to bring it up to a certain level of service. I think it was to bring it above C. And then specific drainage areas were called out as well, being those drainage areas I talked about.
So in effect, the 380,000 spent Solitude Lake Management, I'm assuming that's the work that was done on Lagunita Morada?
That's correct. And Washerwoman's. They had a contract for both those areas.
Okay, so that includes both, because my question is, Lagunita Morada wasn't finished, and I know the aspects of when it might be, but any idea of how much more that will cost before it gets done?
I think the estimate we're looking at right now is about another $250,000.
Okay. Yeah, it was a little bit deeper silt than I think everyone figured, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had more product. I'm going to call it more product there than we had anticipated, and it was a little bit more of a challenge.
Okay.
Rick, you remember the one time when they drained Lake El Estero to get the product out because it was only about a half an inch deep at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Disgusting. Oh, God, it was awful.
Well, Lagunita Morada was about, what, 6 feet of product?
I think it was closer to about 8. There was a lot of material that was taken out of there, and a lot more than we estimated. So yeah, we have a little ways to go.
Can we start a fertilizer company to beat some extra revenue out of the bushes? That could be City of Monterey fertilizer.
Well, a lot of it does go to land reuse where we can, but it's kind of a challenge getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit. But it's kind of a challenge because we want to always reutilize that stuff and keep it out of landfills. But the season that we have to take it out doesn't really match the season when the farmers want it. So it's one of those danged if you do, danged if you don't. So
yeah, exactly. I have a question. I don't know that I've missed this in the past. What is the on-call, all this on-call, Chapin on-call, people on-call? Had I not seen that before?
So it's been there before. It may be different terminology, but basically when we use a contract, we can complete a contract either by formal bids, which you're very used to seeing. Solitude, for example, was a formal bid. We have on-call services with Chapin where we have them do quote unquote minor work that they can do to facilitate another project coming forward. So that's another way that we get work done, and we're just utilizing it during this quarter a little bit more than maybe some of the other quarters you've seen it.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed there's a lot of on-call with different people on this report. Chapin wasn't the only one. And is there, and again, I don't remember the answer to it. Is there a maximum that can be spent on that on-call basis?
Yes. Each of the on-call contracts are governed by they are governed by the charter. They have a maximum expenditure limit. Our contracts are for $1 million per annual year, but that's citywide. So it's not just Measure P. That's anything that happens that they may do something. If we had some other thing that came forward, it would come out of a different funding source. And the on-call work, for example, work at the waterfront parking lot. If we had something that wasn't quite exactly where it should be, we needed some work there. They had some chains that were done out there. That was done by on-call as well by Chapin. Obviously not part of the Measure P expenditures, but it still eats into their overall $1 million annual limit.
I'll also share with the committee that the on-call contracts are a really good tool because in order for government to procure, sometimes it's a long process, this bidding and selection process, write up all the specs and go through all those hoops and hurdles. So the on-call approach enables us to have these standing contracts that don't have financial commitments, but have like terms and conditions for services and fees. And as Steve and his team needs these different experts across, whether it be in CIP or city projects or Presidio, we can use these contracts as needed versus trying to procure each and every one of them, which is very costly. So sometimes it's warranted to have formal bids, like Steve says, and sometimes it's much more efficient to have these more general ones, again, that don't have financial commitments, but enables his team to be responsive in pulling these services when needed. So it's nice to have both tools.
And just to, if I can also add, just for clarification, as we're going down looking at the attachment for this item, the Whitson and Wallace were on call as well. Those are design charges. Those aren't engineering. Those aren't construction. The Chapin is construction, boots on the ground. Whitson and Wallace are pens and computer to get the plant out.
Steve?
Yeah, because it had, I guess, in the granite rock that supply contract, you had materials, like in the first on sidewalks. There was granite rock for materials, and then Chapin on call for, I guess, the labor on that. Correct?
So essentially, what the direct cost for materials would be something that we did. The Chapin cost would include the actual labor to install it. We wouldn't buy from Granite to give to Chapin for installation. The Chapin stuff in the sidewalks is getting prepped for a different thing, where perhaps we didn't have that overall larger contract for sidewalks in place, and we had to get something done ahead of a paving project. So it's very likely that that's a curb ramp or something like that that wasn't part of a contract we had in place. We had to get it done ahead of a Measure P paving project.
Steve, on page 4, you've got a Whitson Engineers and it's breakwater survey. This is under payment. So I'm assuming that is the road on the breakwater, not the breakwater itself.
That's the parking lot area over there is where it was. It's trying the interface of the road that comes down into the parking lot.
Okay.
Can you clarify on the revenue piece? So this is funded by a 1 cent sales tax. Does that include Amazon sales?
Lauren, you muted, Lauren.
I just saw the alert on my screen. So with Measure P and S, it's a district tax. So the Amazon sales are slightly different, but yes, the answer to that is yes. We get the direct sales tax from that. And we actually get it much better than we do under the standard sales tax that we get in the general fund. So the answer is yes.
But it's still going to end up showing lower, obviously, because that's only going to be from citizens of Monterey paying the sales tax, as opposed to in normal life when people are going to Macy's and buying something, and they might come from Salinas and buy something from Macy's, and then that stays here. Whereas if that person stayed at home in Salinas and bought something from Macy's online, we wouldn't get that tax. And that will show why our revenue will be lower. That's correct.
All right, so you've got some of the concepts and they're kind of conflating, and also the state makes it hard because there's 2 set of sales tax laws. The sales tax that we get from this, we call it the state portion, before the citizens approve Measure P, S, and G. The local portion is governed differently. The local portion, the way I like to look at it is, if a citizen's buying it, we're going to get the sales tax. Okay, there's no pool. With the state allocation, if someone bought from Amazon that is a part of the city of Monterey, we don't get that purchase as a direct allocation. It goes into a pool, a Monterey pool, and we get a portion of that. Our portion of that pool right now is actually not very favorable. So this committee, which is focused on Measure P and S money, which is the local tax, the way the Amazon online sales are allocated based on this set of tax law is actually better, because if a Monterey citizen buys from Amazon, we're going to get that sales tax. It doesn't get into a pool, and we don't get an average of that pool. We get what our citizens and our residents spend and purchase. So right now what we're seeing is the dynamics is that the local tax, because of the online purchases, is actually doing better than the sales tax via the state law portion. So right now we're actually seeing the local taxes faring better with this online shift than our general fund portion is.
How does Amazon determine a Monterey citizen? Is it from the address on the credit card or the shipping address of the item?
It should be the shipping address because it's more focused on the use, which is the local tax focus. So yes.
So if I buy something and have it delivered to my mother-in-law in San Diego is going to get the sales tax for that.
Yes, typically that's the case. I don't want to convey like I'm an expert in this because online allocation is really complicated. And so, yes, the local tax measure is actually much better when it comes to online tax allocation. Honestly, it's an area that I think the state should reform altogether with the technology that we have. I don't think jurisdictions should be taking a percentage of the pool. And it will be interesting to see if and when this becomes a proposed legislation change. So, but for now, Measure P and S and G in this regards is actually doing fine.
And is that why then that it is higher, that like when the hotels are closed and so there's no sales tax being collected for food and beverage revenue or rentals or anything, and stores are largely closed, but we're still doing bad, we're doing okay. And is that because of the online?
There's two portions. I want to break your question out to do two different sections. Our sales tax is deteriorating because tourism, big conferences, and just the shelter in place. So as we mentioned in the last couple of meetings, this 10%, $10 million number that we've been targeting is really more like 8. And that's in line still with Measure P original planning in terms of annual appropriation. So we're coming in closer to 8 million because of the pandemic. So I definitely want to put that out there. The second portion of it is online spending. Yes, we're seeing a migration to online spending. If we are looking at the Measure P, S, and G revenues, the online spending is fine because of the allocation rules I shared. If we look at the general fund portion, this migration to online sales is actually a problem. It's a big problem in addition to the pandemic itself. So I don't know if that answers your question, Carol.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? So we have, with the interest that we have, 1,348,000 basically, that we from through 11/30. And because of what we still have almost $4 million left over. Steve, what do we have? And I don't remember the answer to that. In terms of anticipated expenditures this year, are we going to run out of money by the end of this year? Our overage?
So our goal is not to run out of money. Our goal is basically to make sure that we're tailoring projects to within our budget projections. So one of the things that we're doing is we're having a little bit smaller projects going forward, so we make sure that we're not getting ourselves into a situation where we come close to going upside down. So that's been our strategy. So right now, going out to bid actually in the next day or two. We have a new software to go out to bid with, which is fantastic. But anyway, we're going to bid next day or two with more sidewalk projects, which are of that 400,000 to 500,000 realm, and the larger paving projects are not as large as they were before. I think our estimate for the next one is in the range of about $800 to $1.1 million for paving. So we're not doing on our horizon. We don't have a large $6 million paving contract like we did this past cycle. We're just kind of being a little bit more cautious, I'm going to say, with how we're putting those projects forward.
Well,
Thank you.
I think in following up to that, there's a budget shortfall, right? It's going to happen, and estimates as to where it's going to end up or whatever. Eventually, that's going to have to lead to cuts in what is made, I would assume. And if I'm incorrect in that, please share. Who determines what projects will not get done on this? What role in any of that is this committee's? Not necessarily specifically in the projects, but in this committee's in the role of the change of all of the future budgeting.
If I don't want to, we just have the oversight in that the money is being spent in conformance with the measure. So really, and we, in the beginning, I think we have no ability to have anything to say about anything as far as expenditures, just the fact that it's being spent in conformance with the measure language, correct?
So that is correct as well. Essentially, what the choice of how we implement the process and go through the process is the city staff, and then ultimately the city council. And then the role of this, as Carol pointed out, is to make sure that the expenditures are done in conformance with the language. Now, as we turn to looking at how we roll out and implement and do the actual projects, that really falls under the city staff and city council's auspices. But you are correct in terms of we've altered our plan based on the funding, as obvious, and we're trying to work through our best process. The one thing I can say is that we're in for the long haul. It doesn't expire next year. Hopefully, we'll be able to make that revenue back and be able to finish the job.
I can tell you that for us, for our purposes, from a group standpoint, basically through the end of the fiscal year is shot. First 2 quarters, there's some stuff still left, a little bit in the second quarter, but it's falling out rapidly. I'd say in a year from now, I think we'll be okay. We'll be back in business again, but I don't even know about third quarter or fourth quarter in this year, but that's again, a new fiscal year for the city. Pro-Am is shot. Things are moving around. Unless we can get vaccine, I don't see how a week's going to happen either. I hate to be Debbie Downer, but next year we'll be back and everything will be good. We'll work harder for you. We'll make more money for you, right, Rick, Nick? we'll be. We just have to fix now, Big Sur, because that's. When we think it's 1 step forward, 2 steps backward, it seems. It's like, I talked to Rick the other day and I'm like, oh my God. And it was when only the one side of the road was out. And it was the next morning, he goes, did you look this morning? The whole road's gone. And I'm like, not that anybody would want to drive over one side of it, but when we think we're trying to move forward, we're getting dragged back again. That will affect us. Big Sur will affect us, not from a group standpoint, but from an individual standpoint. So, I mean, again, we're working as hard as we can, but I would say to you that to the end of the fiscal year, the group possibility of group business is next to none. Sorry.
I want to also comment on Nick's comments regarding our financial position. I think previously when we spoke in October and December, Steve and I were speaking to this group about how when we looked at the inception of Measure P, I think the forecast was about $8 million per year for 8 years to kind of do some of the work. And the $8 million number was also in the ballot measure. We were fortunate that our revenue actually came in stronger in some of those years. As you could see on that page in the report, we had 9, 10, 10.3. So that gave us some flexibility, especially with some of the prices competition that we had and some of the prices that we had in some of those years. Nick, I think the forecast now brings it down to about between 7.5 to 9.5 in the next 3 years. So I think it kind of brings us back to some of our early year estimates. I think, Steve, we're seeing some good prices come in on some of the current bids, right, on some of the projects. So we're hoping that in combination with the reduced budget back to our original estimates, and also some of the pricing that's coming in for some of these bids that we're getting for the larger project that are actually favorable, that I think, like Steve says, in the long run, the purpose of this funding should come out okay. Because we had some strong years, we're getting some favorable numbers, and also the revision of the sales tax is coming in alignment with what we had originally anticipated for this funding source. So hopefully, in 5 years, like Steve says, we'll get the job done, and the numbers as a whole in the 12-year process should be good.
Well, I think, didn't Steve, you said, I mean, the bad news was, the economy being down. The good news was the economy being down, oil prices being down, people now not being as busy and actually wanting to do, to bid on projects that we could then get at a better price. So, for the purposes of Measure P and S, there has not been a real downside. And I don't know that, again, that there will be. Because as we went down on the one side, the economy going down, because you were having a hard time at one point when things were going well for the economy, getting more than one or two people to bid, right?
Correct, yes.
And they came in unfavorable compared to our estimates too. So there was a correlation to the higher revenue to the price point that we were having to buy at. And now with the downgrade in our estimates, current pricing is better as well. So thank goodness, keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully that continues to correlate for the purpose of this funding.
Great. Any other questions? Nick, Rick? Shall we then?
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. So just one more question then. So from what I'm hearing as of right now, and I understood most of all of that before I asked. I just like to get it, reiterated to me once a year, a couple times a year.
Sure.
But that stuff being said, at this point, are you all anticipating that there will be cuts to projects specifically? And when would that happen? I mean, we meet 4 times a year. So is there some meeting where we could show up and we're like, well, we did spend all the money here. You all approved that we're not approved, but verify we spent all the money, but we're now out of it. I mean, is there any identifying of we're going to be cutting XYZ or we're going to be pushing XYZ projects off for 2 years or 3 years? Is any of that happening yet? Any of that part of the process already occurred?
So a little bit of it has already occurred in terms of the way we're approaching the project, in terms of the size of the projects. And I think that is our method of how we're dealing with it right now. We do anticipate that if this process continues out longer, we may have smaller projects or as opposed to, 3 paving projects a year, we may go down to 2 paving projects a year or something along those lines. So it's a situation where we're being very dynamic with it. I could run numbers. I'm not sure how valuable it would be to say, okay, if this goes on for another 6 months as it is right now, here's where we're going to be. Right now, the horizon we're looking at in terms of our projects and project delivery is a little shorter than it's about a year ahead is what we have planned out right now in terms of the size of each one of those. And it's based on the current inflow of funding. So if it goes shorter than we have, then we'll have to adjust again. If we get greater than that, that'd be great. And that'd be a good problem to have, and we can solve that problem much easier. But right now we're looking about a year ahead and with our projects that are outlaying based upon the funding that we have.
Thank you.
Anything else? Rick? You have any other questions?
No questions. Take it to the public and then I'll make a motion.
Right. Do we, any public comment?
No public comment.
Right.
I'll move that we find the expenditures in the current report to be in line with the ballot language.
I'll second that. Do we have any discussion? Given none, can we have a roll call, please, Lisa? Uh-oh. She frozen? She's frozen.
The joys of Zoom meetings.
Sorry,
Last week-
my computer did something weird, but I'm back.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Yes. I have Carol Chorbajian,
Aye.
Nick Cina,
Aye.
and Rick Heuer.
Aye.
And those are our present committee members.
Motion passes unanimously with those present. Thank you. So may we then move on to number 3, unaudited periodic report for the period of July 1, 2020 through November 30, 2020.
I had no comment.
Rick?
I'm fine with it. I have no questions.
And I don't either. So shall we see, is there any public comment on the,
No public comment.
and then may we entertain a motion to approve the unaudited periodic report? I'll move that.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, then may we have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Carol Chorbajian,
Aye.
Nick Cina,
Aye.
Rick Heuer,
Aye.
and Rick Aldinger and Judy Sandelin are not present.
Motion passes unanimously of those present. Thank you. I don't know that we have anything else. Is there do we have any other public comment? I don't. No. And I guess we would move to adjourn. Are we, I do have a question. Are we still on target then for the other, I think April 12th is our next meeting. Are we on target for that?
Should be fine.
All right.
And then if I may ask as well, Stephen and I were kicking around the presentation in one of the staff reports. There's a chart on expenses. I know this committee really focuses on expenses, but expenses is really volatile. So on the second report, there's a chart that shows the percentage of expenses spent and then a bar chart. Does that add any value to this group? Because we just thought we could drop that from the report. Do you have preferences? Is that something you like to see regularly? It's the item regarding review unaudited expenditure on page 1, and then there's a bar chart and a percentage spend.
Go and look.
Does the group have a preference for us to retain that, or do you want us to drop it in the future?
You're talking specifically the bar chart,
Yeah, and the table, and the table with the
comparison.
Yeah.
Yes. Does this committee like to see the year-over-year comparison of the expenditure and the bar chart?
The year-over-year, yes. The bar chart, I don't need, but the other is preferred to see.
Okay. So we'll keep the year-over-year in dollars and percentage and drop the bar chart because it kind of doesn't add any value.
That's fine.
Cool, good. We just want to make sure it's meaningful.
Thank you.
And I also looked at information I had on sales tax, Nick. So I looked it up. The difference between the general fund 1% that we get from the state's portion and the 1% measure P&S in 1 year alone is $2 million. That's the power of the local tax and the difference in how the tax rules pertain to that local tax. So it's actually a really good thing. So it's $2 million.
Seems like we should change our entire sales tax to a special district tax.
I think there's a reason we should. Yeah, I agree. It definitely illustrates how this law is not so good overall. So.
No.
But I'm glad that our measure P or S and G will at least enable Monterey to reap some of those dollars that should be coming to us locally. That was it for me, Carol.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? Then I'd move to adjourn then, please, and we will see everybody on April 12th. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.